We face many points of inflection in our careers and our lives, from new jobs and promotions to difficult bosses and layoffs. If we had all the time and resources possible, we could certainly figure it out eventually, but we don't. The challenge is that we're walking into roles where expectations are sky high, timelines are crunched, and there isn't much patience. So you need an accelerator, and that's exactly where coaching can help. Think of coaching as a catalyst for your success. In Coaching Ahas, we share stories of leaders, their courage and vulnerability to lean into coaching, and the breakthroughs that change their lives forever. Welcome to Coaching Ahas, where we share real stories of talented coaches and clients, one aha at a time. My guest today is Abhijit Bhaduri, good friend and fellow coach. He was the general manager of learning and development for Microsoft, and he was also the chief learning officer at Wipro, a prolific author, animator, actor, musician, podcaster, coach, and brand evangelist. That's Abhijit for you. Welcome, Abhijit. Finally, we get to do this.
Thank you so much, Anna, for having me. I was hoping that you would invite me way earlier, but you didn't.
Okay. So, our goal here is to share stories of leaders and their breakthroughs. I know you have something in mind. So, tell us the story.
Well, Shana, I think the way I approach coaching is, my clients fall in three categories. One is a set of people who are doing work which either they don't understand fully or they are not able to articulate it to somebody else.
Right.
So that's the first category. The second is sometimes a skill mismatch, when people move through their career from being an individual contributor to a people manager to a functional leader, business leader, enterprise leader. Through each of these, your role changes, how
Right.
much you focus on your task or your department to versus what you focus on outside of the organization, your stakeholders. That becomes more complex. And the third is, sometimes the issue is a fit with the culture or the relevance to the culture of the organization or the
Yeah.
employer. So these are the three categories. And one of the most recent examples of, when we say, how do you articulate the work that you do? When somebody says, what do you do? Um, as long as you are inside an organization, sometimes that answer is pretty easy. I am, as you described me, as a chief learning officer for Wipro, or I was the general manager learning and development for Microsoft.
Hmm.
People understand Microsoft, people understand learning and development, and
Yeah.
GM, they kind of have an idea of what that could potentially mean. But when you become an entrepreneur, as my client did, who was a former CHRO of an organization, he decided to go solo because he was unhappy in the work that he was doing.
Yeah.
He and I, when we spoke, his main issue was that he was not able to get his entrepreneurial venture off the ground. And when you sort of really go ahead and sort of really start to engage in a formal conversation, the question I was asking him is, okay, I know what you did at so and so organization, but now if you were to tell me, what do you do? How do
Yeah.
you answer that question to a client? Suppose I'm a potential
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
And his answer was, that's a pretty easy one. I could be a CHRO. I said, but the client must have a CHRO already. So then what are you trying to tell the person? What do you
Right.
do? So I think when you ask a question like that, it helps a person see where the block could potentially be, that, the
Hmm.
way you're articulating it. You don't articulate it in form of a role, but you talk about in terms of the output, what
Yeah.
impact you possibly have. And that is actually one of the big things that it helps the person articulate that. They says, okay, now I understand how to go and talk to this person. We spoke. I'm sort of giving you a simplified version of it. But also to actually start to understand that there were elements of the entrepreneurial role which the person was uncomfortable doing. So how do you ask for business or develop business opportunities? So those are some of the skills that he had to work on, and the way that he's kind of saw himself. Sometimes a change in the role was also had to do a lot with the identity.
Yeah.
Your identity as a CHRO is different from your identity as an entrepreneur, you know.
Yes.
So then what does it do to you? And, so those are some of those conversations which are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And, saying that, do you feel good about the work that you do?
Yeah.
That can trigger a conversation.
Such a fascinating story. And, certainly I can relate to it as well, having made the transition myself. And any time that you transition from no matter what to entrepreneur, it's hard. But when you go from a successful business executive to entrepreneur, it seems so much harder. You made the transition as well. Often our identities are tied to the work we do. And it's a case of A, figuring out the identity, but also realizing that what got you here isn't going to get you there.
Mhm.
As Marshall Goldsmith has said many times. So, as you think of this particular CHRO you were helping, is there perhaps a powerful moment of breakthrough? I'm sure there would have been so many insights, but is there one that stands out for you?
As I was listening to him, I was asking this person to say that, if you were to draw a visual, and he said,
Mm,
well, I can't draw. So I said, no, just describe the visual to me.
okay.
Um, Describe the visual of you being an entrepreneur. And so the visual that he was describing was knocking on doors, so that's what his visual was all about. Whereas, when I said that, okay, how would it look different if I were to ask you to describe your role as a CHRO? I
Mm,
sort of said that it's a meeting room with, all my directs and my entire team, and it's a and I was asking him, so, describe the scenario. So he was sitting at the head of the table. I was describing that,
yeah.
um, and I said, suppose the client were to be there. Where is the client sitting? So he said, the client is sitting at the head of the table. I'm one of the many people out there. So it is, a sense of loss of power,
Yeah.
the identity, and what it's making him feel, in terms of the equation.
Yeah.
At one point of time, this person was a peer, and now, this whole business of engaging with this person in a different capacity, a different
Yeah.
identity, that is really what, I think was the big breakthrough moment.
Wow, that is amazing, Abhijit. I mean, what a powerful way to bring about an epiphany. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. We've known each other for well over a decade now. And one of the things that strikes me about you is that there is an underlying theme of being an educator, right, and really tapping into human potential or helping people really realize their true potential. That's an underlying theme in almost everything you do. It seems to fuel you. So tell me, why is it important to you to do so?
I think it's a way for me to learn. Actually, then the best way to learn anything is to actually try and simplify
Yeah.
something and teach someone else. So it's really an effort for me to learn things from others and, share what I know. This whole
Yeah.
process is really, I don't think I paid attention when I was in college and school. So I think I'm just trying to make up for it.
That's amazing. Why is it so important to be a lifelong learner for you?
I think there's so much which is happening in the world. I mean, and when you look at it, any field. I mean, you talk to anyone. I was traveling uh, to see a festival of performers, and
Hmm.
I was chatting with quite a few of them. When you look at their world, what does it mean to be a mime artist?
Yeah.
And when I was talking to them, there was so much to learn about how do you educate the people even during a performance. I mean, that was what was so fascinating.
Hmm.
He was saying that, think about it, if you see a sign language interpreter, you don't even pay attention to that person if you are able to hear it without the sign language help.
Right.
Whereas our entire world is assuming that the world needs sign language.
Right.
How do you convey your craft through sign language? And I was thinking, wow, that
Wow.
must be really tough.
Really tough.
And the person was just so, comfortable doing that. It's just no inhibitions, sort of did that and was demonstrating something. And I was really blown away. And I'm always in awe of performers, especially street performers, because you
Yeah.
kind of think they operate really like, without any pretenses, any props, anything. They are right
Yes.
there with you. So I spoke to a number of them. It was really amazing to see how they're through their craft, they're teaching others on a constant basis.
Yeah. It's really interesting that there is this element of almost childlike curiosity you have about everything, and you've not lost it at all over the decades. And sometimes, we do lose that childlike curiosity. And I guess, that's the time we get a bit more jaded, cynical, perhaps. So it's great to see that you're able to keep that curiosity alive. What is it that enables you to do that?
As I said, that I'm that annoying kid who asks those questions all the time. And I think it's when you look at all the professions that people have in this world, there are hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
professions. I'm always fascinated by the career stories of people, how did they decide to do what they did? And that's
Yeah.
always a fantastic origin story. And then when you ask people about what are they doing now, what do they want to do, and there is just so much to observe in the way that they are sort of doing that. That is something that has never, ceased to fascinate me.
Yeah.
And that's also the fuel for what I write. So
Yeah.
writing actually always comes from what you see in the real world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's boring writing. It's preachy. So I think when you sort of look at
Yeah.
that, it helps me really understand what the people are really working on.
Yeah. And is there one takeaway that you want to share with our listeners from your time in Scotland with, in this with this performance?
Yeah, so I was, really fascinated by what makes each of these crafts different.
Ah.
So like a street artist, a magician, a stand-up comedian, all of them are different.
Hmm.
And yet there is this innate ability to listen to the audience, even though, mind
Right.
you, it is the performer who's speaking or doing something, and the audience is just watching, observing.
Yeah.
How do you sort of listen to the audience when they're silent? I mean, such a powerful learning possible for you
Wow.
as a
Yes.
coach. How do you learn when the other person is silent? So that was something that really I was
Wow.
blown away by.
Mind blowing. You're dropping all kinds of pearls today. Okay. What drew you to the world of coaching and why is that important to you?
I think, it's that same process that sometimes, I think that it helps to ask a question, even when you think you know the answer. Uh, and that is a skill to build in yourself. It's a way of growing that, you kind of don't always preempt the other person, because I've had to work a lot on my listening skills. And then, so podcasting, for example, is a way of building my listening skills.
True. True.
Uh, you ask a question, you can't give the answer, and you can, uh,
Or lead the person towards the answer
or
either.
lead the person towards the answer and say, "Can you talk about?" So, but I think it's a way of sort of really. I think most of the work that we do is a way of improving ourselves. Our work is a great way
Yeah.
of improving ourselves. So that's really what I try to do.
Yeah, I love that. And that is so powerful. Ask the question even if you think you know the answer. Oh my God, so powerful. Okay, this is a question that's going to be really close to your heart. So we have gone from a place where we used to talk about VUCA countries. We have gone to a VUCA world now. Disruption seems to be the norm. Half-life of skills is what, 2.5 years? And that was pre-AI. So God alone knows where we are today. We seem to be under constant pressure to reinvent ourselves and our careers. You know a thing or two about that because you've certainly reinvented yourself and your career so many times. So, could you tell us maybe a little bit about what is Career 3.0 and some of the key ideas from the book?
Sure. So one of the things that has changed in this world is we have moved from, what I call career 1.0, which is one skill monetized in one ecosystem.
Hmm.
So it is that you've, become a lawyer, and then you remain a lawyer for the rest of your life until you
Right.
retire. So that's been the traditional model. You learn, earn, and retire. It's a three-stage model. And then you kind of begin to see that so many people, for a variety of reasons, are also looking at trying out a gig, a side gig which they monetize. I mean, the pandemic saw a lot of that people were learning a new skill, they were monetizing a new skill. And so that's a career 2.0 model when, there are people who are fantastic singers, but, they are also doctors, surgeons,
Hmm.
trained certified surgeons. So that and they are earning there are two income streams from two totally different ecosystems.
Yeah.
So that's your career 2.0 model. Career 3.0 model is just this whole business of juggling a set of skills and monetizing them in different ecosystems.
Hmm.
So that is really where I see the world going, that people will have to reinvent themselves periodically because people are living longer, so they will
Hmm.
work for many more years, but the half-life of a skill is becoming very short.
Yeah.
Uh, and above all, the employers are constantly having to change their business model, and you see a
Hmm.
lot of the layoffs that are happening. Because of this,
Hmm.
careers will need to be run by the person more in a career 3.0 mindset, even
Right.
if you're employed. I mean, being
Wow.
able to build a multidisciplinary perspective is so powerful.
Right.
So
Right.
that's how I see the world evolving.
Yeah. That's really interesting. How do we reinvent ourselves, Abhijit? And how can coaching help?
I think a lot of times, people being able to understand that the possibilities, there are a lot of times when you see people get very heartbroken when they experience a rejection, a layoff, they get rejected in
Yeah.
an interview. But you kind of really have to build that entrepreneurial mindset, because one of the skills I talk about in my book, Career 3.0, is that you build your skills portfolio pretty much like a VC does, so you
Ah,
have multiple skills you are building at any given point of time. Some are, super sharp, and everybody wants those. Some which are in the process of, becoming sharper. And there are some which you are just about getting started, and then there are
right.
also skills which have become obsolete. So I think when you view yourselves as a collection of these four kinds of skills, from obsolete to new skill, versus things which you are sort of now beginning to get good at, and something that you are a master at. So
Right.
if you look at this portfolio of skills, that's the mindset I would urge people to build.
So interesting. Let me ask you maybe one last question before I let you go. And so this is a rapid fire one. What's your favorite coaching question ever?
Why do you think it happened?
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We could talk forever. Thank you so much, Abhijit, for coming on Coaching Ahas and sharing your wisdom with our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me, Shana. It was lovely. Many of your questions made me think they're also equally powerful coaching questions. So
Love
thank you
it.
so much
Love
for
it.
having me.